Hi, I'm Josh McGrath,
I'm Andrew Haas.
and this is the Art and Pursuit Podcast. Welcome back. In our last episode, we asked you to do three things. Number one, we wanted you to write out a list of all the things you were looking for in a potential wife. Number two, we wanted you to identify those things that were essential versus important versus preferential. And finally, number three, we wanted you to sit down with your authority and accountability to make sure that you had the right things in the right category. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I actually want to read a social media post that I stumbled upon shortly after filming our last episode that really highlights the value and importance of creating a list and of identifying those things that are essential and important. And so this is from a social media handle titled It's Heidi.Marie. It was in her story, I believe, and she's a single woman, I think, and she titled it Man of God. And she had all these things written down, and we don't have time to go over all of them, so I just grabbed a few of the most important ones that were on her list here. Number one, she writes, puts God above me. Excellent. Then she goes on and writes things like, takes care of his body and mind, reads his Bible, emotionally mature, has a good circle of friends, a strong prayer life, has high standards, not a partier, good with kids. And that's a great list.
It's a really good list, and it shows someone who's actually putting effort and is intentional toward prioritizing the right things. As guys, we need to grow in our ability to generate good criteria.
Yes.
And come up with good lists. It's generally not our strong suit.
Nope.
But it's something we should be good at.
Yes, because if we don't know what we're looking for, we'll fall for anything.
Yes.
And that's something that we talked about in our last episode. Now, today I'm excited because we're actually going to be unpacking this idea of friendship, familiarity, and attraction, and exploring how these three things dynamically impact one another and ultimately oftentimes influence, romantic interests. So to set the stage, I think it's important for us just to recognize that when it comes to men and dating, it is the physical attraction, the beauty of a woman that initially gets his attention. It's the thing that will likely cause him to consider initiating a conversation with her to pursue a romantic relationship. It is a sexual desire that is going to draw him to her.
Yeah. It's a little cliche, but a guy doesn't look across the room, notice a woman, and think she's got a great personality.
Yeah, that might be a little weird if that's the only thing he's observed.
Yeah. But, that's by design.
Yep.
You've got to start somewhere. The problem is if you stay there.
Yes. And which unfortunately so often in our culture, that is the only place, the only criteria that men are using to evaluate whether they should be pursuing a particular woman. And because of, Instagram, social media, and just the culture as a whole, unfortunately, an unrealistic expectation of what a woman should look like has been fed to millions of men. And now the amazing women that are around them, they're not even pursuing or giving a second look to because they don't look like that 1% on Instagram, right? And so what we want to do is help kind of reground men into understanding what they should be attracted to.
Yes. And at the risk of stating the obvious, we know that men generally have a stronger sex drive than women.
100%.
But we need to recognize that the sexual energy or drive of a man is fundamental to his pursuit of a woman.
Yes. I mean, humanity's created to be sexual, with sexual desire. And without that, guess what? You and I would not exist here today. Now, it is important to note this, that once a man is sexually interested in a woman, his objectivity, his ability to be objective, basically goes out the window.
Yes.
This is why it's so important for him to have, authority and accountability in his life, which we talked about in episode 6.
Yes.
And why it's so unwise for any man to be making a decision about a relationship, a romantic relationship in isolation, apart from authority and accountability.
Yes. Early on, it is vitally important for a guy to remain objective. As you said, you can't do that on your own. And so that's why you bring other people into your sphere, because with their help, you will be able to have objectivity on some level. It's still going to decrease as time goes on.
Yep.
And that's by design. But at least you got to start out there.
Now, one of the things that I can't say I've ever really heard other people talk about is this idea that familiarity, like through friendship, through community, when it comes to dating, often decreases a man's interest in a woman.
Yes. Familiarity does make it harder over the long term for a guy to be physically attracted to a woman. It's not the fact that you know a woman that's going to impede your attraction to her. It's the fact that as you get to know her over the long term, in a friendship way, that's just naturally going to put her more as a friend, as a sister, and your innate ability or desire to be attracted to her will just be diminished.
Yeah, this is interesting because when I think about, the men that I've worked with over the years, it's not uncommon that what comes up in conversation at some point is well, there's no women around. There's no women that I can date or marry. And I'm like, well, what do you mean there's not? There's a lot of great godly women around. And what you begin to find as you kind of unpack that sentiment is the fact that either A, the guy actually just is not sexually attracted or physically attracted to any of the single women in his life, in his community. And you tend to find out, it's because of the longevity of having been in friendship with them over the course of many years. Or B, he actually is attracted, but is afraid to initiate, is afraid to reach out and actually ask her on a date.
Yeah, and that's a whole separate set of issues.
Yes. Very
Very important to recognize that and kind of unpack that and figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, because the thought to consider is this. If you're a single guy and you want to be married and you're looking around your community and you're saying, well, there's no other single women that I'm attracted to, a kind of a thought to consider is, imagine if you were just stepping into your community, into your friends group for the very first time. Statistically speaking, you would be attracted at some point to one or more of the women in your community.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And something to recognize is, guys, for women, it's likely going to be the opposite, meaning the more she gets to know you, it's likely that she'll become attracted to you the more familiar she becomes with you. And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. That's just a dynamic to be aware of.
So that is interesting because, for women, it's less about the initial physical attraction and more about the getting to know the values, right? Getting to know the character qualities, getting to know how he acts around people, the way he lives his life, the way he serves others. And that only can be ascertained through longevity of relationship, through familiarity. And so there's this awkward tension that actually does exist that I don't know if anyone ever talks about, which is that the longer a single girl knows a single guy, the greater chance she will have of being attracted to him, but likely his attraction to her will decrease over that same period of time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting balance to find, and it's something that, just to be aware of as you are in the dating scene in that arena, if you're looking for someone to pursue and possibly marry, it's just something to be aware of. You are going to have more interest up front, likely. It's going to take longer for her. And there's somewhere in that middle ground where, things usually work out.
And that reminds me of a story a friend of mine shared a little while back. She's Catholic from the Chicagoland area, and she was part of a singles group out there. And she was telling the story of how, there was a bunch of single guys, single girls in the group, and the single guys just weren't really pursuing any of the single girls. And then a new single girl would come in, and all the guys would pursue her because, she was pretty and new and all this stuff. And how it left the other single girls who had been around for a while in that group feeling very much like, what's wrong with me? Why do guys only ever care about just the new person, the new pretty girl? And that highlights and really typifies this idea that men initially are very physically driven in their motivation to initiate a relationship with a woman. But that eventually, for most, that actually begins to die off the longer they know her, the more familiar they become with her.
Yes. Something interesting to note is that in marriage, this idea of friendship over the long haul, diminishing attraction, it actually flips in marriage, which is pretty cool. The longer you are friends with your spouse, when it's paired with sexual intimacy, that actually makes that person more attracted to you. So that's one of the things you're actually doing post-marriage. You are developing a deep friendship. But you can't just be deep friends with anybody.
Sure.
And so something that guys need to purpose to pay attention to is like, what is the friendship potential of a person? Is there the opportunity and the possibility of being really good friends with them?
That's an excellent point, because the friendship, I think we mentioned this in one of our episodes, the best relationships are going to come out of friendship. And what happens though oftentimes is when you are friends with somebody, there is a natural kind of window of opportunity. I know we've used that term a few different times now, but it's true. There is kind of this moment in time where, while being good friends, you could see you're still physically attracted to them. You're still sexually attracted to them, and so you can initiate a romantic relationship there. I don't think there's a scientific window per se, but it differs, right? And be very nice, but it differs, right? Probably from person to person. And the problem for a lot of guys though is when they are in that window, they really do struggle to initiate any type of romantic interest, because they're afraid of several different things. Some of the things that come to mind are fear of failure. What if she says no? Asking her automatically will change the dynamic of your friendship with her. So if you are really close friends and you kind of are living life together in community, what happens when now she knows I'm interested? What that requires a man to do is to be vulnerable and to be turned down. What if she goes to her authority, to her accountability, to the greater community, which hopefully she's doing, to process your interest in her? What you as a man have hopefully gone to your authority and accountability, to the greater community, to process your decision to pursue her. So now there are multiple people who are in your community who know of this interest. And what if she says no? Now what's that going to do to the friends dynamic, the friends group? So there's a lot of things there that oftentimes impede men from initiating that. Now that's just kind of like on a very visceral level. Then there's like the classic, like just selfishness and sin level. Right? There's a lot of other reasons why a man who's good friends with a woman who he might be sexually attracted to isn't actually pursuing her.
So while a guy might initially be sexually attracted to a woman, that's great. Obviously you can't stay there.
Sure.
Right? And that's where it's really
very
important.
unhealthy. Yeah.
Unhealthy to stay there, right? We know that. We can see that in culture.
Yep.
Too many guys hang out there and just enter into a relationship based on that. A guy really needs to purpose to look at other aspects of someone's life and use that to really evaluate, is this something I'm going to move forward with?
Yeah. Yeah, because while the physical attraction might be the initial hook to get a guy's attention, that is a terrible barometer to use to determine whether you should marry a woman.
Right. And you got to use the right criteria.
Yeah.
We like to find things that ultimately don't hold much weight. You want to take in things like, what are her talents, her values, what's her faith, right?
Yeah.
Intellect, interests, like things that actually carry weight.
Yeah, because those things, you can speak to this in marriage and in life. Well, you don't need to be married to know that life is difficult. And then you get married, you have kids, you're living life together. The things that really are going to carry you through those difficult moments and those difficult seasons is not how beautiful she is or how handsome you are. It's something so much deeper. It's the foundational things of values, of faith, of just like determination and ingenuity that are going to help a marriage sustain the long haul.
Yeah, and it's important to note too that those deeper things don't just exist. I mean, aspects of them exist,
Sure.
but a person does not innately carry with them through life all of these traits that someone else might find valuable. They've got to be worked on, cultivated. And so, yes, beyond just an attraction to somebody, there are other aspects of them that make it worthwhile. But recognizing that those things they don't just exist on their own without any effort.
Sure. And men really, when it comes to pursuing a woman, they should be looking for a woman that they can see themselves sharing life with for the next 60, 70, 80 years, depending on their age, right? And someone that they can partner with in life, not just someone that they're like, oh, they're attractive. And that's where the idea of like, yeah, friendship goes so much deeper than just a physical attraction. There's a bond there that you have over something well, in the Christian faith, that's eternal, right? It's faith in Christ alone. And that's ultimately the best and most sure foundation that you can have for any type of relationship.
In that process, it is imperative to evaluate the friendship potential. Because again, a thriving marriage is going to be both, it's going to have physical attraction and it's going to have deep friendship. You got to have both. There are a lot of people you could be attracted to. There's a smaller number of people that you can be deep friends with. And that's really hard actually to figure out. Doesn't mean you should try. As guys, you still got to try. And at the end of the day, this isn't like you're searching through the haystack for the one.
Sure.
Right? And there isn't the one, there's the kind. You're on a mission. Your efforts are going toward finding the type of person that you're attracted to, both physically, but then also who could you actually be deep friends with?
Yep. In our last episode, we talked about this idea of, essential versus important versus preferential criteria. And there's this bit of a Venn diagram that should exist in every man's life, single man's life, right? Of, the important and essential. There should be overlap with the type of woman that you're attracted to. And so if what's in your essential and important buckets over here isn't overlapping at all with the type of woman you're attracted to, you need to change the type of woman you're attracted to.
Yes.
And that might sound like an extreme statement, but that's an honest, holistic, helpful statement.
Yeah.
Because so often what men put on paper and say this is what's essential, this is what's important. And then suddenly they're over here. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. You see it on social media all the time. Should I be dating someone who's not a Christian? And I'm like, no. Why are you even asking that question? That's not even a question a Christian should be asking. So it's amazing how what we want to encourage men to do is to make sure that what's in the essential and important categories is the type of woman they're actually attracted to. There should be a massive overlap there.
Right. And why is that? Because all dating relationships should either progress to covenant or no covenant.
Yes, so we've talked about this before. Every dating relationship is headed towards a decision.
Yeah.
And that decision is inevitable, and your goal is actually to get to that decision sooner than later. And so when you begin to think about this concept of covenant versus not covenant, we're talking about, marriage versus not being married here. When marriage is kind of the direction you're headed when you start out a relationship, it begins to put into perspective those things that are important and those things that are not important. And it will automatically, particularly for men, help to prioritize where physical attraction, where sexual attraction should land. Because while important and an essential part of a marriage union, it is not the most important.
Exactly. Yeah. In marriage, the most important aspect of a healthy marriage is not how physically attractive your partner is.
Men need to have a vision for the things that are important. We had an entire episode on vision. What one was that? Episode 2. We had an entire episode on vision and the importance and value of having vision for your life. And for men who are single, who want to be married, they need to have a vision for marriage, not just a vision to be attracted to a woman or a vision to be in a relationship. And when you begin to have a vision for marriage, that begins to help give you vision for the things that are important and valuable inside of a marriage. All the things that you mentioned. Because I would imagine that, I don't know how long into a marriage before you wake up one day and you're just like not super attracted to your wife like you were in the butterfly dating stage. It might be different for every couple. I won't put you on the hot seat now. I don't want
make me
you,
give a
I don't want,
number.
I don't want your wife to listen to that. We'll beep it out. Beep. It was beep days. But like there will come a point. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
And I think about like just even in terms of like just friendships, right? Which is very entry level compared to a marriage relationship. And the fact that like these are people who I love dearly, who I don't live with, who I see on really their best days, and I still get annoyed and frustrated with my friends. And there are days where I'm like, I just don't be like that. and there's not even like an intimacy, a sexual intimacy, anything like that you find within marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, our world is so driven by, just sexual promiscuity, sexual desire. All of social media is littered with this, which is really sad. And maybe we'll have a later episode about it. But one of the things that we want to do is we want to reorient men to understand what are those things that they should prioritize. And again, physical attraction is important.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not the main or sole thing by which you should determine whether you're going to initiate a relationship or whether the woman that you want to pursue would be a great wife.
And this is why I would argue that every successful relationship has accountability from as early as possible. Because again, you want to be evaluating the right things.
Yes.
We have our own biases, blind spots. Objectivity, as you mentioned earlier, diminishes very quickly.
Yep.
And so you have to bring in accountability.
You have to. So as we conclude here, if you're a man, single man, and you want to be married, we're going to again give you three things to do. Number one, we want you to take that list from last episode that hopefully you made, the one that has the essential, important, and preferential criteria on it, and see if there are any women in your community, any single women in your community that fit that criteria, in particular, the essential and important. And number two, we want you to sit down with your authority or accountability and just present the opportunity to them to say, hey, is there anyone in our community that you think I should be interested in or that I should pursue? And finally, number three, we want to encourage you to take time to process and pray about the potential of pursuing one of the women in your community. Again, even if you're not attracted to her at this current moment, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue her because, again, while attraction is important, it's not the sole thing that should determine whether you are going to pursue her. Now, regardless of whether you are attracted to women in your community or you aren't, this is just a very good rubric to apply to your life. So maybe there are women in your community that you're attracted to. Still do this. All right, still follow this because this will set you up for long-term success in not only the dating relationship, but ultimately in marriage. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can contact us on any of our social media platforms, and we will see you here next time on the Ardent Pursuit Podcast.